Thank you and good morning to everybody. Yes, my name is Eero Mäkinen. I just use a couple of words to explain who I am. I'm a graduated naval architect from Helsinki, Finland. I have been working over 40 years in shipbuilding in Finland, with actually 3 foreign assignments also included in that period. And I retired from STX Finland quite recently, 3 months ago. But the presentation or the material which I will present to you, this is based on all the files of STX, and in that way I'm representing STX Finland here as well. So my presentation will cover shipbuilders' view of cruise vessel market, cruise vessel shipbuilding market, the market, development, design, and some words about the construction as well. Just a few words of the company as a background, because this information is coming from that company. The parent company is STX, a Korean company, which is a fairly new company, only about 12 years old, and has been expanding very rapidly. And as you see here, the turnover is, or has been last year, roughly $30 billion, so a fairly big company, even in Korean scale. But the company has entered into difficulties now, and a major restructuring is underway in Korea and in other areas where the company has subsidiaries. And that also means that the shipyards in Europe, which STX has, both in Finland and France, will be somehow restructured, or a new owner has to be found for those yards. The structure of the shipbuilding in Europe is that STX Corporation, the Korean company, owns STX Europe, which is headquartered in Oslo, Norway, and under that there are shipbuilding operations in France and Finland. 2 yards in France, 3 yards in Finland, but again, as I said, some restructuring is underway there as well. So as to the cruise and ferries, both French and Finnish yards are heavily involved in cruise vessels, and the Finnish yards in ferries as well. So STX claims to be one of the biggest cruise ship construction shipbuilding facility in the world, building ships in 5 locations in Europe, unique design competence, I'll come to that later, and those yards have produced quite many of the very famous cruise vessels like France, Queen Mary II, and the Voyager and Freedom class vessels, including also the Oasis class vessels, which was discussed quite extensively yesterday in Tom Allen's presentation on safety and regulations. The yards are building also other vessels, particularly vessels for Arctic operation, as Finnish yards have been and are #1 in the world regarding design, development, and construction of ice-breaking vessels for all over the world, both north and south. The yards in Finland are here. By far the biggest yard is in Turku, where all the big cruise vessels have been built. We have another smaller yard in Rauma, which will be closed now by the end of June next year. That decision was announced just about 3 weeks ago. And then there is a third yard in the capital of the country, in Helsinki, but that yard now is a jointly owned, 50-50 jointly owned company of a Russian shipbuilding company, OSK, and STX Finland. This is all the passenger vessels Finnish yards have built since beginning of 60s, altogether about 105 vessels. Half of them are cruise vessels and the rest are ferries, but most of the ferries are what we call cruise ferries, which are carrying passengers and cargo, or cars and trucks, but also which are, in a way, short cruise operation units. Okay, some words about the cruise vessel market, which is of course the basis for the operation of a shipbuilding company like STX Finland. Just as a summary, the global business volume of cruise vessel construction is 3.5 billion euros today. It used to be 5-6 years ago much higher at the level of 5 billion euros, but the demand has gone down. There are basically three segments of clients for these yards, for all the yards who are involved in this cruise ship construction. The big four, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Line, NCL, and MSC. And then there are other smaller players, what I call here other credible players, people who have operation and who are potential clients for new building in the future. And then the third category is other. There are lots of activities in the other segment, all kinds of projects by all kinds of people, but unfortunately only very small part of those projects materialize, maybe much less than 5%. So, but a lot of projects for shipyards to work with. STX's position, STX has been in cruise ship construction continuously since early 70s when purpose-built cruise vessels were started. The position is certainly based on references, product technology very much, reliability of delivery. It is very important that the cruise ship is delivered on time because the ship owners start marketing of the cruise vessel already a year and a half before the delivery of the vessel. And then what is also very important is a reliable and large supplier network. The cruise vessel market is, of course, based on the number of passengers buying cruise every year. This is the recent development of passengers from various areas of the world, and by far the biggest area is North America. Then is Europe, and Europe is typically divided here into continental and UK because of traditional reasons, and then the rest of the world. And as we can see here, the development, the growth is quite considerable in Europe, continental Europe in particular, and again in North America as well. But all the other areas are so far marginal, and the development has been very slow. So 56% of all the cruise passengers today come from North America, the other 29% from Europe, so altogether 85% of the market is covered by passengers from North America and Europe. As I said, the rest of the world is fairly marginal. What is typically analyzed is that what we call the penetration, market penetration, meaning here that what is the percentage of a population in a certain country or area, the population which buys cruise per year, every year. So this penetration in United States and Canada is 3.4%, meaning that 3.4% of the total population of North America buys cruise every year. In Europe, it is between 1.5 and 2.5%, so a lot of potential. And in the rest of the world, it is very marginal. And as we see here in Asia, it is 0.05, and that really means that the big potential in the long-term future is China, and we see some signs of that materialization of that already. What is also quite important for the operation of cruise vessels is that it is quite seasonal in different parts of the world. This is from statistics from 2008, and let's say the occupancy or volumes of passengers, volume of operation in different parts of the world. And as we can see here, I mean, this is over the year of 52 weeks. There is a lot of activities in summertime in Europe, in Mediterranean, Baltic, and rest of Western Europe, and Alaska. While in wintertime, the main emphasis is on winter. And this, of course, means that there are lots of ships which make transatlantic crossing twice a year, and that is also taken into consideration in the business planning and ship design. This shows the development of cruise fleet in the world, and the blue curve is tonnage, and we can see that the development, and in terms of gross tonnage, the development was fairly mild, very slow until early 90s, whereafter the development has been quite much more rapid. And today we are at the level of about 20 million gross tons of cruise vessels, and the number of vessels in service is about 350. And as we can see here, the red curve, which shows the number of ships, that is fairly linear, which means that quite steadily the fleet has grown by about 8 to 10 vessels per year. However, as we can see from the 2014-2015 figures, the development is somewhat slowing down. The lifetime of a cruise vessel is typically more than 40 years, which is quite considerably longer than for cargo vessels. Cargo vessels are typically only 25 years before scrapping, and of course this fact that the lifetime is 40 years, that is a fairly negative from the point of view of shipyards. It's a somewhat cyclical business, cruise shipbuilding construction, and very much affected by outside events, incidents in the world. Here we can see the deliveries from 2000 to 2014, and as we can see, there was a major drop from 2003 to 2005, which was a clear result of September 11. The cruise ship construction or contracting stopped for almost 2 years immediately after September 11. Another negative turn was, of course, this Lehman financial crisis, which started end of 2008, and that was seen in deliveries 2011 and 2013. So, and as a summary, in the yard side there are 3 shipbuilding companies, Fincantieri, Meyerwerft and STX, with 2 locations, which cover about 80% of new building construction. And on the other side, in the owner side, ship owner side, there is also a heavy concentration as 4 groups, those which I mentioned earlier, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, NCL and MSC, they cover also about 80% of the market. So it's the market both in the demand and supply side is highly concentrated. Here are the locations of all the 4 yards in Europe, Italy, Germany, France and Finland. Mitsubishi in Japan is building today 2 cruise vessels for AIDA cruises, but they have been not continuously in cruise ship construction. The yards have been a lot criticized that they are not effective enough to get the prices down, and of course the ship owners are never happy with the prices the yards offer. But by this graph I demonstrate that certainly the shipyards have made their part of the efficiency game, because this shows the price per gross tonnage. Price per gross ton for cruise ships, all cruise ships excluding very small ships, delivered from 1990 until today. And as we can see, the average has increased perhaps from $3,500 euros per gross ton to about 4,000. So in 20 years, only about 15% increase, which clearly demonstrates, at least to me, that the shipyards have done a lot of work to become more effective. Summary on the market. Today, 350 vessels in service. That is actually very close to the same figure what there are LNG ships in the market. So both very highly sophisticated vessels. And the order book is only about 10% of the fleet in service, which in a way indicates that the business is quite healthy. We can say as a comparison that, for example, in the bulk carrier market, typically for the last 2-3 years, there has been about 40 to 60% of the fleet under construction. So very different figures. Order book is down by about 50% from the pre-financial level, which of course means a challenge to the shipyards who are dependent on cruise ship construction. Slow growth anticipated only. Geographical diversity represents a big potential, particularly Far East and in particular China there. Product has become and is becoming more and more complex. They are very sophisticated nowadays. Ship prices are extremely depressing, and there is growth potential. We don't know exactly where and what, but I think there are many reasons to be optimistic in this business. Then some words about the development. These four groups, I mean ship owners, yards, design companies and suppliers are all involved in the development of the product. And actually, traditionally, let's say 20, 30 years ago, it was very much the whole development in the hands of yards. But today, I think the emphasis has moved much from yards to the owners, because the ship owners, the cruise companies, they know very accurately today what they want and what they think their clients want. So therefore, there has been over the time a change in this pattern. This is just kind of a principal analysis of the development from early 70s until today, divided here in the elements like what are musts from the ship's point of view, and then technical point of view, and then what are the wants, which are the elements which the passenger is looking at and the ship owner is looking at. So over the time, safety, reliability, environmental friendliness, these are the general trends in the societies. And then the wants, of course, initially very much value for money, efficiency, special attractions. There are lots of new things on ships, multiple choices like multiple restaurants, very impressive designs, and unique experience for the guests, for clients. This is a picture, or another version of this picture was shown also yesterday, which shows the development of size from early 70s until today. And the biggest vessel, Oasis class today, is about 13, 14 times bigger than the biggest cruise vessel built early 70s. These are all built by STX in Finland, and these are all for Royal Caribbean except the Fantasy class, which was delivered in the 90s for Carnival Group. Size development, again, very slow development until mid-80s, whereafter it was very rapid. What kind of slowed down the development was the Panamax restriction, which is now going away because a new Panama Canal is being built. But as we see from 1990, the development of size has been quite rapid, with the Oasis at the top. Space ratio also has changed over the time, and by space ratio, that is kind of an indication of the standard. Space ratio means how many gross tons there is in a ship per passenger, and the passengers are here taken as of the double occupancy level, meaning that we assume that every cabin has 2 beds and 2 passengers. So we can see here that the development has been quite steady from 1950 until today. So the space ratio average is twice today than what it was about 50, 60 years ago. Another feature of interest is balconies, which were introduced early 80s. And here are 3 generations. Fantasy class, 8 ships built for Carnival. Only 5% of the cabins had balconies. And then Grandeur of the Seas for Royal Caribbean, which was built mid-90s or late 90s. 20% of the cabins had balconies. And in today's modern Panamax vessel here, represented by Costa Atlantica, 70% has balconies, 80% of all cabins are outside cabins. So this is actually the development which is very much has been run by the ship owners. So they have been able to present more attractive products to their clients, which means that today it will be very difficult, and in the future even more difficult, to sell cabins which are not outside cabins or which don't have balconies. So the balcony percentage, meaning the number of cabins with balconies divided by the total number of cabins, we can see here until mid-90s practically no balconies, and now after 2005 there are practically no vessels without balconies. So it would be totally risky for the ship owner to introduce a new vessel now without any balconies. People would not buy those cruises anymore. Cabin development over the time of 40 or 50 years, typical early 70s was 15 square meter cabin with 2 beds, separate beds. Of course, there was a shower toilet element, as always, already at that time. Then the next phase was somewhat bigger cabin, so that there was a double bed and also a little living room area. Then one with balconies. Typical standard today is about 18 to 20 square meters. And then there are lots of suites, of course, which is only a minor part of the ship, maybe 10% of the total capacity. So again, this is development very steady, and this also, of course, was shown by this space ratio analysis I showed earlier. In the machinery side, there are basically 3 generations here. The traditional one was diesel mechanical propulsion, then which is on the upper part of this picture. Then the next one was diesel electric propulsion, and then the present system, which is dominating the market now for big ships at least, is diesel electric machinery with azimuthing propulsion, with Azipod, which is the ABB product, and with the Mermaid, which is the other product, basically with the same technology. Environmental issues have become very important over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And this is, of course, from the ship's point of view, that means emissions to air and to sea. This is just a kind of a theoretical list of what the issues are: NOx and SOx, CO2, particulars, other greenhouse gases, and also noise. And then on the water side, we have oily water, we have black and gray water, we have all kinds of waste, we have ballast water issues, and anti-fouling also critical. And these were, to some extent, yesterday covered by other authors here. So overall, there has been fairly radical development in the energy efficiency. Of course, energy efficiency and environmental issues, they go hand in hand. So this shows the relative energy efficiency of various ships over the time, and this is energy efficiency per passenger. So of course, the bigger the ship is, the easier it is to get the energy efficiency per passenger down. But as we can see here, from mid-90s until today, the reduction of energy consumption has gone down by 40%, which is a very radical picture, of course. SOx issue is, of course, very hot topic today. I don't touch that more in detail, but I think everybody knows that it's a very hot issue in certain areas, particularly in the Baltic. I think that is a kind of a front runner in these environmental issues, whether we like it in the Baltic or not, but that seems to be the case. In the construction side, there has been a lot of steady development in the construction methods, particularly modularization of issues, so that more and more parts of the ships are built onshore, typically by sub-suppliers, and this covers, let's say, AC room modulus, a lot of galleys and pantries, equipment, staircases, wet units, of course, both for cabins and for public rooms, public toilets, and then all kinds of things related to the entertainment, like theater, stages, and so forth. And this was a picture shown yesterday. I think particularly Oasis of the Seas represented a major challenge as regards to structural integrity, and I think that was work done jointly very much between the yard designers, the ship owner, and also classification societies. And I think the result is obviously quite good. There are 2 vessels in service of that class and 3rd vessel under construction in France. Damage stability, very widely discussed yesterday. I don't need to touch that further, but these are kind of challenges, have been challenges for shipyards and ship designers, safe return to port, and related issues. And of course, fire safety, ever-increasing regulations, but also requirements to go beyond regulations, which requires this equality principle to be followed and investigated. Some words about the design, kind of philosophical thing first. What are the key issues as regards the added value to all of us, and all of us means, of course, the ship owner in the first place, but also the shipyard and suppliers and passengers also. So just listing these, what is interest, what are the driving forces here? Basically, of course, best earning capability for the ship owner, more attractive to passengers, higher ticket prices, better operational efficiency, lower manning, better fuel efficiency, and environmental friendliness. All these elements are fundamental when creating the new concepts and when the ship owner assesses what is economically feasible for them. And just simplifying who is interested in what. If we look at this issue from the passenger's point of view, they are of course interested in experiences of a cruise, cabin standard for sure, onboard service with all of its elements, and safety and reliability. Ship owners, they look at the brand value, onboard revenue, operating cost and capital cost. And the shipbuilders, they look at the technical side, like hull form, machinery, propeller, steel structure, and of course cost of construction, cost competitiveness. A typical modern cruise vessel is, the schematic or the concept of the GA, general arrangement, is here. So we typically have 2 decks of public rooms, fairly low down, and then above that we have 5 to up to 7 fairly identical decks with cabins only, and then on top we have the sun deck and related facilities. And this, of course, the change to this concept was really resulting from the fact that lifeboats have to be placed not more than 15 meters from the water level, which meant that because in the past all the public rooms were high up and the lifeboats were at that level, but the new regulations meant that all the major public rooms had to be replaced down below the cabin deck areas. Okay, space demand. This is somewhat theoretical, but gives an indication of what is important. Divided here to ship function and hotel function, and basically the ship function, which is a technical function, that covers 25 to 30% of the total volume of the ship, while 70-75% only is dedicated for the, let's say, revenue side of the operation for passengers, services, and so forth. Okay, over the last 40 years, there has been a lot of development work and speculation on the hull form and other major conceptual things. These are some examples of concepts which have been studied, but the fact of the matter is that from the economic point of view, only the monohull makes sense. All the others, some of these have been tested even in full-scale operation, like like a catamaran concept, but has proved to be economically inefficient. So we are back to this monohull, which is a simple, robust concept, and obviously economically the most feasible alternative. We have a kind of a numerical design method which we call C-key, which really is starting from the requirements, technical and operational performance requirements of the ship and requirements for passengers, and then we analyze the volumes and we come back with as a result, we get a numerical result giving the performance, the main characteristics, volumes of the ship, including also the indicative price for the vessel. So that's a very simple way to compare various concepts and various designs. Just to understand the cost structure from the point of view of the shipyard, you know, the shipyard nowadays doesn't do everything by themselves, but they subcontract to the maximum extent to companies which are specialized to cruise ship supplies. We call turnkey deliveries, those packages which cover components and work. And as we can see here, and I emphasize this is from yard's perspective, so the material and turnkey, what the shipyard buys from outside is roughly 70% up to 80% of the total cost of the vessel. Design is about 5% only. The shipyard's own production cost, in this case, about 13%, and then there are other costs like indirect overhead costs and financing, etc. But anyway, out of the price, out of the ship's price, 70 to 80% is what the shipyard buys from the market, from their suppliers. Mostly very specialized suppliers to cruise ship construction. Cruise ship economics, this is an analysis for the basis of, let's say, understand what is important, where the shipyard and ship owner and everybody should concentrate on to get better economics. Here we see operating costs, capital costs, financing, shipbuilding costs, and then, of course, operating costs and income. So, okay, we don't need to go through in detail this, but this is just shows, I mean, at what level we do this kind of analytical work when we start a project to a client. There has been a lot of concepts shown in the market over the time, and typically these concepts have been first introduced 10 to 15 years before they materialize into a product. Like the atrium for Oasis of the Seas, that was already introduced in 2 ferries which were built for the Baltic in the beginning of 90s. So it took about 20 years before the same concept was adapted to a large cruise vessel. This is one of the most recent ideas, this XP tray, which is where there is kind of a area, also outdoor area down below in the area which is below the cabin decks, so that it's divided, the outdoor deck area is divided at 2 levels on top and then at the level where the lifeboats are. Okay, then finally some pictures of the building process. Quickly going through, these are all related to operation in Turku shipyard in Finland and the construction of the Freedom class of vessels. Freedom class was built for Royal Caribbean. It was a stretched version of Voyager class, and Freedom has a gross tonnage of about 155,000, and 3 vessels were built: Freedom of the Seas, Independence of the Seas, and Liberty of the Seas. Here we see 2 of the vessels of that class under construction, and as we can see, here is a kind of a lifeboat test underway when taking this picture. Okay, everything starts with steel construction, of course, plates, from plates and profiles, and actually the steel construction, the hull part of the vessel, is typically 15%, up to 15% of the cost of the total vessel, so only 15%. Steel block, grand block erection inside, pipe shop typically large piping is being manufactured or developed by the shipyard itself. Smaller piping is quite often bought from outside suppliers. Sheet metal shop, again, this is an area where there are differences between various yards. Some do very much by themselves, and some order and buy a lot of things from suppliers. Pre-outfitting work, that is really to maximize the economic efficiency of the operation, so that the maximum amount of pre-outfitting will be done to blocks before a block is erected to the hull, to the graving dock. Assembling blocks, in this case 3-deck height, they might be up to 5-deck height in the cabin area. And then painting hall, different shipyards have different strategies as to the painting, but at the Turku shipyard we have 5 large painting halls where the block is taken after it has been pre-outfitted, and then from the painting hall the block is being taken to the graving dock. Aluminium blocks, I think generally speaking normal commercial shipyards hate to work with aluminium, but for weight and stability reasons, in most cases, some of the upper parts of the superstructure are made of aluminium, like funnel and masts at least, sometimes even more. Keel laying in the building dock here. As we can see here, this block has a fairly high outfitting degree, outfitting extent. A lot of machinery, all the big piping, cable trays, a lot of other things already in place before the block is lifted to the dock. Erection of the hull, block by block, and stern block with electrical pod propeller, in this case ABB's azimuth propeller. ABB's azimuth was actually initially a joint development between ABB and STX Finland, but then STX Finland sold their part of the development and the company to ABB, so today that company, Azipod, is wholly owned by ABB. Cabin factory. Cabins are typically constructed at separate factories, either owned by the shipyard or a separate company even. In the STX case, the shipyard has a separate company about 20 kilometers from the shipyard, where there is a panel line, kind of a line to develop and build the cabins, and that they are trucked to the shipyard. And the number of cabins this so-called peak year factory, for example, builds, has been up to 8,000 units per year. So that means about 40 cabins per day. The cabins are lifted as one unit to the ship. These are fully equipped cabins with all the equipment except some electronics, I think, and then there is no floor, because the floor is, of course, the steel deck of the ship. Docked at an outfitting pier, the outfitting time is typically, I would say, 10 to 14 months. The total construction time of this size of the vessel is from starting of cutting the steel is about 2 years, 3 months. But the total time from contract to delivery of the prototype is typically between 36 and 42 months. Engines, of course, installed to the machinery room. This is an example of a main lounge which has not been furnished yet at all, so it's just a steel structure, and here is a final outcome with all the equipment installed. Galleys, there is a lot of stainless steel requirement. This is all dedicated, or let's say this is all required by public authorities, particularly US public health, and very high requirements, quality requirements, and very intensively also enforced that those rules are followed. typical cabin. This is a typical modular cabin, and various public rooms. This is the atrium, and as we can see here, there are cabins on both sides of the atrium having windows and facing the atrium. A 3-level high dining room. As obviously many of you have seen cruise vessels at different stages, and I would think that the quality of cruise vessels has increased over the time considerably, and you hardly can see in hotels anything comparable nowadays. A 3-deck high main lounge, an ice rink, altogether 10 Royal Caribbean vessels have an ice rink, which is used both by passengers and also both for kind of ice shows in the evening. And finally, the ship is ready for delivery. This almost concludes my presentation. Just a few words of refurbishment, which is of course also an element of business for shipbuilders. Normally not the same shipyards as what are doing new buildings, but some are doing both refurbishment and new buildings. So, as I said, the typical maximum age before scrapping of a cruise vessel is 40 to 45 years. The ship has to be dry docked, of course, according to the rules, twice in every 60 months. And in connection with those dry dockings, which typically take 1 week to 2 weeks, some refurbishments and retrofits are made. First, scheduled major renovations are typically done 10 to 15 years after the ship has been taken into service, and that covers mostly those areas which have been subject to tear and wear, interior surfaces of passenger areas, public space rebuilding, and sometimes also public space concept change, and add cabins. It is quite common to add cabins to the maximum extent, and the companies, although it may look a little bit funny, but after a delivery of a new building, they start very quickly thinking of where can we put more cabins after a couple of years. Then other typical retrofits are nowadays the energy savings issues, and of course sometimes new safety features, new regulations have to be taken into consideration. Then the first concept's lifetime is usually 20 to 30 years, and sometimes and quite often a ship changes hands after 20 to 30 years, and in that connection fairly extensive modifications and conversions and refurbishments are done. Okay, driving force for these improvements, which are being done in connection with the repair and refurbishment and conversions. Of course, normal wear and tear has to be covered. New rules and regulations. In most cases, the grandfather rights mean that those don't have to be taken into consideration for older vessels. New technologies, particularly energy-saving issues, are very popular today. Sometimes concept changes, and particularly if the ship changes hands, there's brand changes which have to be taken into consideration. Developing passenger expectation over the time. I mean, in 20, 30 years, the world typically changes quite a lot, so that the passenger expectations are different than at the time the ship was built. This is an example of a very special conversion we did. This was a lengthening of enchantment of the seas, which we initially built for Royal Caribbean, but what was then lengthened 15 years later, lengthening by 22 meters. We built the lengthening part in Finland, but this actual lengthening process was made in Holland. And what is very critical in all these conversions, refurbishments, particularly in these very sophisticated, demanding modifications, is time. because, you know, the ship owner wants to minimize the time the ship is out of service. So there is typically very strict regulations or very strict terms as to when the ship has to be redelivered. And that, of course, means also that there would be high penalties for delays. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for your clear and complete presentation and very interesting presentation. I would like to comment with you something that is, I think, important. Maybe the cruise market in Europe is the best business in shipyard that we have permanent in Europe. Why do you think this market has not gone to Asiatic?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there are several reasons. One is that the cruise ship market is, let's say, from the point of view of number of ships and the business volume, quite small compared to what the cargo market has been. And it's also quite much fluctuating. But I think the other issue certainly is that cruise ship construction is very different from cargo ship construction. It requires very close cooperation between the ship owner and the shipyard, and typically the ship is not, when the contract is signed, the ship is not designed yet. It takes another year after the contract to do the design work, I mean, with the shipyard, with the ship owner. And I think the mode of operation in the Far East for cargo ship construction has been that the ship has to be fully designed when signing the contract. So the shipyard doesn't want to hear anything on any changes or anything from the ship owner after the contract is signed. That's one major issue. I think the other issue is that these big cruise companies, they understand that if they order a vessel from a shipyard which is not experienced in cruise vessels, it requires a lot of work from them. They have to probably double the personnel to help the shipyard and to cooperate with the shipyard. I mean, yes.
Yes, thank you. Another thing that I have is that the name of the shipyard in Finland have changed during last year. No? First, the third name was Wärtsilä.
Yeah, the history there, and I actually was employed 44 years by the same company, basically, but with different names. When I joined the company, the name was Wärtsilä. Then it became Wärtsilä Marine Industries when two Finnish shipbuilding companies, Wärtsilä and Valmet, were merged. Then there was a bankruptcy in 1989. We re-established the operation, and it was Massa Yards. And then the Norwegian company Kværner acquired Massa Yards. That became Kværner Massa Yards. Then the Norwegian company Kværner sold the yards to another Norwegian company, Aker, and that became Aker Yards, Aker Finn Yards. And now, 3.5 years ago, or 4 years ago, Aker sold the yards to STX Korea. And as I said, another change is most likely coming.
Thank you. Then the name of Wärtsilä is now only in the engines, no?
That is correct. But I must point out that, you know, Wärtsilä used to be kind of a diversified group in Finland with shipbuilding, other machinery construction, even porcelain and so forth. And the diesel engine construction started at the shipyards, both in Vaasa and in Turku. But then, of course, the diesel production developed, the diesel business developed, and when the shipbuilding operation had bankruptcy in '89, then the diesel production and shipyards were totally separated. And today, the name Wärtsilä is only with the diesel production.
Yes. Another comment I have is that astilleros españoles and cooperate a lot with some companies from Finland. No? One of them was Delta Marine, that is a very famous technical office. Another thing that we cooperate with them, with Finland, was the modular cabins, because we have in Puerto Real a workshop with the modular cabins coming from the licensee of Barcelona at this moment.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and I think Finnish technical office, shipyards and so, has been a point in order to follow the design of this type of vessel. For the reason, I suppose, with your figures, that the cost of the design is only the 5% of the total cost of the vessel. But what is the invest in innovation that you have continuously in the vessel? I had also the occasion to sail in the Silja Serenade at the beginning of the 1990s, I think 1990, no, something like that. And then a very good innovation was the large atrium in the whole length of the vessel, with cabin in the both sides, as have you shown here. And what is the price of the invest of the innovation in this cost?
Yeah, I would say that over the 30, 40 years of the major or most visible innovations have been, one was what we call all outside cabin concept, which we patented, which was the first vessel was Royal Princess, where the idea was that all the cabins are above the public spaces and in a narrower superstructure, so that all cabins have window and most of the cabins have balcony. That was the all outside cabin concept. Then the other is certainly this atrium, which again it took a long time before it was adopted to cruise vessels. I think Azipod was also one in which we played a fundamental role. I think there are a lot of other things also, but as I said, now this innovativeness, it was very much in hands of shipyards earlier, but now I think it's divided so that the shipyards cover those innovations which are strictly related to the technical concept and naval architectural and marine engineering issues, while the innovations related to the product for passengers, those come today from ship owners.
Well, another more, any questions? More questions? No more questions? Yes, it's very interesting presentation. Is necessary to remark the necessary tools that is needed or are needed for build this vessel. For instance, the thickness of the place, the coordination of everything in the shipyard, and this thing that is necessary to do in this type of vessel. Dealing with the cooperation of the ship owner, and I think the classification societies, and also with the cooperation of the flag administration. No? That is very important, because I think that a vessel is not only a vessel is built by a shipyard, but also is built by the ship owner.
Oh yes.
But the administration and so on by the classification societies. No?
Yes, very true.
Then, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.